Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Industry Insights Worldwide. Today, I've got the amazing Darryl Hurs with us from Indie Week and from DIT. Hi, Darryl, how are you?
Doing pretty good, doing pretty good. I'm on the road. I'm in Thailand. I'm in a hotel, and not. I'm working by a pool usually, which is better than working in a Canada where there's snow right now. So,
Thank you so much for taking your time out in sunny Thailand to come and speak to us, share your story with us and your expertise. But also, you're looking at this from a different angle. So, do you want to explain to the listeners and viewers how you're going to look at this kind of episode that we're doing, and a little bit more about what you do, where you're from, and yeah, some of the platforms that you cover?
sure. Well, I think I'll start with my name is Darryl Hurs, and some of the stuff I've done is launch festivals and conferences. And COVID's really put us in a place, so we moved online, and that led to us launching DIT, which stands for Do It Together.
Yeah,
Um, and I always find it funny, kind of how we're taught be DIY. The music industry is the worst industry to do it yourself in. It's
yeah,
like if we really take a step back, it's like, is that really how I want to do this? So that's where we came up with why don't we do this together?
great idea.
Um, yeah, so we hold weekly webinars, we host online conferences. It's a platform that's like social media, where anybody can network with anybody else. They could post, like, here's my song, looking for a show in, put a city or a country,
Yeah.
um, that kind of stuff. So it's it's a positive that's come out of COVID. We're still working at it. We're still building. We've got over 3,400 members worldwide, and it's
Congratulations.
growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, right? Um, and then I guess like I've been in the business in many different roles over the years. Previous, I've worked with CD Baby, Live Nation, you kind of name it. And yeah, I'm coming from a perspective, I guess, where I moved at one point from Edmonton to Toronto, and I knew zero people. So how to network and get established or know people,
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Yeah, especially trying to do it on your own. And the industry kind of has the independence and the indie side of it. So you kind of deal with the indie side of the industry. Is that right?
Yeah, it's weird. I've always been the indie guy.
Yeah,
Like my first job was working at H&B record store in 1992, I think it was.
yeah,
And one of the first things was take care of the independent section. So I've
yeah.
literally been indie from the start.
Well, this is how a lot of the artists start off, right? And we need to figure out how does this music industry operate? Who are the main players? What do we have to do in order to become successful? And I think this is where a lot of artists struggle, right? And I think your platforms are amazing. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the platforms that you run and where you're based? Because you're based all over the world, but you're mainly based in Canada. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, uh, I'm going to announce something in the new year, but yes, I'm based in just outside of Toronto. Been there for since '95,
Yeah.
and the platform, it's really, you know, the artist at some point, the labels stopped developing artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel lucky there was kind of a blueprint. Like you do this, you get to the next level, do that, you might get noticed, do this, you have a chance. Um, where now I feel there's like no blueprint, or people are being told all these different ways to do things. And I see a lot of people that are really talented spinning their wheels,
Mhm.
and it's not their fault. It's just what they think they need to do.
Yeah.
And there's I feel there's a lack of strategy or planning that produce results going on. And again, it's not anyone's fault. It's just there's no structure to it anymore.
Yeah.
It's do whatever. And
Hope for the
somebody
best.
sees something on TikTok, you go, "Oh, I'm going to do that," and it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not you.
Yeah.
And then they see something else take off and it's trending. Oh, I'm going to do that, and it's like, no, that won't work for you. It's tough, and so we're trying to give a platform that people can connect with like-minded people.
Mhm.
um, People are DMing each other, finding people in different territories that are similar. And then plus we're trying to give education through webinars and conferences to try to go, here's what we believe
Yeah.
is a framework that you can use and put it to use, because it's such an important thing that's being missed in the industry today. And it's sad that record labels don't develop artists like they used to.
Yeah.
um, I often say it's kind of like, David Bowie took 3 albums before he became known.
Right.
And
Right.
how many David Bowies are we missing out on right now?
Missing on a lot, because this is the thing, right? How do we know if it's going to work? And I think this is part of it, isn't it? And it's also the cost side of it and the resources. So you offer a lot of resources it's free, isn't it? Every one of your platforms, they're free, unless you're going to one of your events, which you pay for.
Yeah, and we are going to be introducing like paid tiers
Yeah.
uh, fairly soon,
Mhm.
where it's going to be more specialized and more hands-on for at the higher levels. But there's always going to be a free section.
And when did you find out that it was a good idea to run a platform like this to support independent artists? When did this start, and how long have you been doing that for, Darryl?
Uh, it's all by accident, like thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
When we couldn't do anything in person, we put like we were like, so the story is we were 2 weeks away from quitting, 100%
No
quitting the music.
way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and I had a call with one of our key staff members, Zach, and I was like, okay, we've got option A, quit. Option B, we run a conference online. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what we're going to do. And he said, let's go for it. So we did, and it was a success. And we're then like, well, we can't wait 12 months because we'll lose momentum. So let's do another conference. So we
Yeah.
now do 4 here, which is
Well
crazy,
done. Well done.
but it's different demographics. So it works. And so essentially, it's only been 2.5, 3 years, I guess, that
Yeah.
we've started doing the conferences. And then at some point, we're like, I think it would make more sense if we made a community type platform, because we would do an online conference and then we'd have to try to get those people back online 4 months later.
Yeah.
Where if it's like a Facebook, LinkedIn kind of platform, they just stay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that came about. And we launched it 2.5 years ago.
And it's a very diverse platform. It's very inclusive. And I think it builds community and a sense of belonging in the music industry. Because I think a lot of indie artists feel like they're on their own. There's no one around them that kind of understands or appreciates how the music industry operates. So you provided a platform that's inclusive, it's diverse, it's representative of different genres, different people, people that are artists, and people that are also music industry professionals. How are you finding that's worked so far? And are you pleased with the progress you've made?
Absolutely. I gotta say, I've learned a lot since going online,
Yeah.
um, from our audience, more so than when we run events and people are afraid to maybe come up and talk,
Yeah.
where they're easy. It's easier to DM me. So I get DMs a fair bit, uh, which has opened my eyes a lot. And I'm very grateful for that. When we first started with Zoom, people, excuse me, some people would leave their cameras off.
Yeah.
And later they would say, I have anxiety. And they would also say, I've never been able to go to Indie Week because I'm afraid of big crowds.
Mhm.
But now this has allowed me to be a part of it because I'm at home and I
Yeah.
just don't need to turn on my camera.
And also know other people, right? So people build relationships between themselves, meaningful relationships, which is also really, really important. I think a lot of people forget that these days.
Absolutely. And we've had some of those artists that have that anxiety. By the end of the conference, they did turn on their camera. They
Yeah.
did talk to people on microphone, where they're like, I feel safe here. I like, this is a place where I can do something they're like, I never would have done this
Yeah.
before, which
Yeah.
was really um moving, because it's like, wow, maybe help them reach a stage where they might grow musically in a different performance level than they've done before. So yeah, it's moving. It's really moving.
Great work. Well done, you. And also to Zach as well, because I know you both and you've done a great job. I just also want to ask you, Darryl, as well, like obviously people coming into the industry, they might feel that they don't understand everything. You don't just offer people from the indie background, you also have people that have also been in major labels and had that major success sharing their stories, right?
Yeah, I'm like pinching myself every week.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, we really had so and so on our platform. This is crazy. Um, it's really weird. When we started going online, even in our early days of going online in this way during COVID, we were able to get higher level industry than ever before
Mhm.
because all we have to do is say, can you spend an hour online with us instead of can you fly to
Yeah.
Canada and spend 4 days with us and out of your busy schedule. So that also was something that proved a lot to me in early days of like, wow, we're actually getting like such quality speakers
Mhm.
um, and cool ones. Like during Indie Week, our first online Indie Week, we had Marky Ramone from his kitchen
I
from the
know.
Ramones.
I know. Amazing. And Ted Cohen as well.
Like,
Shout out to Ted. You know, you've had some,
yeah, it's like that's an intimate, like we're in Marky Ramone's kitchen and he's telling of days of in the studio. Like that's crazy. Um, and every week we've got a very special session called TED It with Ted Cohen.
yeah,
It's every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Toronto time. And Ted has worked with everybody you can name. Like his stories range from Prince, Fleetwood Mac, The Who. He managed Van Halen for literally a week. He managed Guns N' Roses, and then
yeah.
they were too crazy.
What names could you say? What, for one guy, that's awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
Honestly, well done. I really love being part of your community. I think you do a great job. Like, obviously, you're looking at equality and diversity from a different angle to a lot of other people. So you're looking at it from a white man's view. What do you see at the moment on that, and how do you see that's kind of diversifying and changing the landscape?
Well, it's been a weird spot.
Yeah,
Like I mean, I think we all have our own path, and in early days, we don't necessarily realize who we are or what we are, and just this is who I am kind of thing, and this is what I deal with. Um, and I think over the last few years, it's really come to light hearing everybody's stories.
yeah,
Um, and that's also online. It's been interesting that I feel there's a higher level of honesty at times
mhm,
when people are talking. And I think it's such an important thing that we understand everybody has their own path
yeah,
and their own way. And for me, I know I've had my own certain struggles, and uh, it sure has not been an easy road, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But yeah, like as somebody, a white male that definitely has privilege in a lot of cases where early days of access to maybe funding or grants and stuff like that. But there are stigmas within the industry that hit everybody. Like in my particular case, I was never really into drugs,
yeah,
and there's times you're at the party and famous producer or artist there, and all of a sudden, wow, here's a whole bunch of stuff on the table, and I'm like, no, I'm good, and now you're not the cool kid anymore.
yeah.
Um,
I get you.
you're not invited to the next party. You're all of a
It's
sudden
sad,
like,
isn't
hey, I
it?
thought we were
That's
working on an album.
it's basically about talent, not about, the other side of things. And I think sometimes it's like a big boys' playground, or should we just say a big playground where people love to have fun as well as work. And you've always been cool to me, Darryl. And I think, sometimes not being the cool kid can be really difficult, can't it? And trying to fit in and find your tribe. So what would your advice to be to people that don't always fit in?
I think don't feel the pressure you have to do something you don't want to do is
Yeah.
one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've seen people go through that and struggle like that you want to help, but it's not your place
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
And You want to be available for help if they need it, but they need to ask for it. Um, but yeah, I've seen it a lot where people are put in positions that they don't want to do things. And I'm talking about maybe on a more core moral level,
Yeah.
not a manager maybe saying, "Hey, you should wear this," because that's just image, you know.
I get you.
But yeah, on core moral levels, I think you have to sort of be careful in what you're allowing yourself. And there's going to be times where you may have to bend a little, but just be careful, you know. Um,
100%, 100%. You've got to think about your reputation as well, haven't you? And that's another thing. It's a professional environment. And sometimes I think some of the older ones that have been in it for a while can kind of relax a little bit more and they're not as professional as what you would expect, shall we say.
yeah, and um, so there's a story that came to the public light fairly recently, even,
Yeah.
and I had run-ins with this person and was potentially going to work with one of the acts I was managing, and stuff got kind of weird, and we just sort of pulled away.
Yeah.
But it's just like major story that's happened just fairly recently. I'm not going to say names,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's like when it came out, I was like, yeah, I remember that kind of happening when we were trying to work with them, and
Right.
um, yeah, it was really weird. So
No,
you have to be careful, And we stopped working with the person, and that potentially could have been something that could have skyrocketed an artist's career.
yeah.
But we stopped working with them.
Yeah, makes sense, Darryl, actually. And I was going to say to you, what kind of challenges and barriers do you find that there is at the moment around equity, inclusion, and equality? Because I think, sometimes we talk about equality and inclusion, and then we talk about equity and inclusion. So, what kind of challenges and barriers do you see at the moment along those lines?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Mm.
I see. Um, in some cases, there's honesty,
Yeah,
right? And I think there's some cases, I don't know how to explain it, but it's weird because I've seen people, I think they're trying to fit in by complaining about something. I don't know how to explain it, but jumping on a bandwagon or something, maybe.
a lot. Yeah.
Am I making sense on that?
Are making sense, yes. I see that quite often actually. Someone feels they have to make a scene or kick up something because it's a trend or it's something that they see happening rather than something that's actually happened at that time. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think what would be um, what I'm trying to put it into sensitive words where I understand that having communication, people create labels to be
Yes.
able to define a certain demographic.
Yeah.
But I feel the labels also impede us actually moving forward because there's times where it's like, and I'll say this one story. I had this artist that played our festival, and we listened to all the music that's submitted. And I remember literally hearing this song and going to the other room and to one of our other programmers like, "Hey, this is awesome. We gotta contact this artist."
Yeah.
And it was an artist from up north, and talking about seal hunting and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's just so different and cool. And I'm like, let's get in touch with them. And so we did. And during the festival, so we have multiple venues, and artists who traveled in, we would have them play multiple times
Yeah.
because they're traveling.
Yeah. Fair
And
enough.
it was like Friday night, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, like we had a 4 a.m. last call. And she comes up to me and she's crying. And I'm like, what, what's wrong? And she's just like, thank you. And I'm like, for what? And she's like, you had me play. Yeah, that's what the festival is. And she's like, no, no, I wasn't put on a stage with this label with other artists. I just played. I just performed like an artist on multiple stages, and there wasn't a label with me.
Yeah.
And that's been eye opening from that point on, right? Um, so I started looking into that a bit more. And so I feel labels, I understand a purpose for them to try to communicate, but sometimes it hinders progress
100%.
because now we're in boxes again.
It's kind of the marketing side of it is the boxes. But then when you want
Yeah,
inclusion, you can't have boxes because that causes segregation, right? And then when you want
yeah,
everything to be inclusive and diverse, you can't have them both. But it's kind of like a music industry. I don't know how to explain it, but there's part of the industry that wants those labels and those tags. But then the artists themselves, they just want to be themselves and they want to be able to perform and reach as many people as possible. So I understand that actually.
yeah. And like again, from HMV background those days, I understand genre labels because you got to be able to say this is country music,
Yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
country music,
Yeah.
things like that. But when it comes into um, a label that has got nothing to do with the genre of music,
Or the music
then
it's yeah.
yeah, it's not about the music at that point, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain that, and it's I don't know
That
if I'm
makes
coming across the right way, but
no, it's coming
um,
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
well, 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 it's like like there was a saying I was invited as an ally to the Indigenous Music Summit a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and they literally said Indigenous is not a genre,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's like this is a country artist who happens to have an Indigenous background,
Right.
so
For
you
people
know,
that don't know this, Canada has a massive Indigenous community. Is that correct? And you have different tribes that represent different stories and their heritage that comes from Canada. So some people they might not know that in the UK. So just for them to understand that as well.
yeah, and there's a really terrible narrative of how the government has treated our Indigenous peoples
Yeah.
over the last year that's come out fairly recently. Um, and so we're in what we call like reconciliation, where we're trying to mend communities and bridges through talking. And there's been a lot that's come out on both sides, and it still is. Uh, but I really do think, you know, I try to think of when I was a kid listening to the radio, and
Yeah.
there's something about being young and naive isn't the word, but it's kind of like, hey, I just like this.
Yeah.
And I'm not overthinking it and why or who's this or anything. It's
Yeah.
just, that's cool. And I wish we kind of had that perspective a little bit more sometimes.
Take it as face value rather than digging deeper and thinking, okay, this is this and this is that, 100%. And I think that's what the younger generations are looking at these days rather than digging too deep. And they just want something they connect with and that resonates with them in an authentic way.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
know, and I think sometimes like I'm grateful to the internet because that's been my entire work practically for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But I think having access to too much information is good and bad because the reality is most people will only read a fraction of information
Yeah.
and then kind of put a spin into what they take it as, and that turns into misinformation at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah. There's a fine balance, isn't there? 100%. And what do you think at the moment? Because Canada's doing great actually around equality, diversity, inclusion across the world. So, what's your kind of thoughts and feelings if you compared Canada to some of the other countries that you operate in and that you've been to? How do you think Canada's doing in terms of equality, diversity, inclusion?
Overall, I think it's good. I think it's well due, and you know, I almost feel like we're catching up.
Yeah,
Um, and I've been very lucky. Like I've traveled to a number of countries, and it's the same narrative in almost every country, truthfully.
yeah,
Um, so Canada is advanced in some ways, but behind in others, I think. Um, I go to Brazil a fair bit, and I gotta say, Brazil is really uh, a place where they celebrate the arts and creativity and being unique. And
yeah,
I think that we still can learn a lot from that.
yeah.
Um, like I go to festivals and I have not seen that much face makeup in the audience and glitter
Colorful
and
costume. Yeah.
costumes and everything, and that's just what they do. And it's like, wow, that's really cool. I'm like, are you performing? No. Awesome.
I'm
You
just
look like a performer.
exactly. Carnival party time. That's it. And that's what it should be. But sometimes when we look at places like Brazil, they kind of operate slightly differently to the way we do over in the West. With the music industry, even because they focus more on the YouTube and those kind of streams where we focus more on other things. So how can we kind of incorporate some of that into what we do and make sure that it is more inclusive, diverse, and everyone's having a good time and everyone feels included and belongs?
Well, I think there's a cultural shift that's happening right now
Yeah,
that is starting. And what we're seeing is so, and again, I'm always referring to HMV because I learned a lot during that time, but part of it in North America, especially, and I see it in the UK too,
yeah,
is we deal with commercial radio a lot.
yeah.
And commercial radio sells advertising. So what gets on the radio is what sells advertising.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
we're very commercial. So therefore, I've grown up in a music environment where a lot of what you hear is safe music,
yeah,
not taking too many chances.
yeah.
Um, and once something becomes popular, everything else follows that route
It-
and starts looking the same, sounding the same. Um, and when I look at other cultures, a big part is they have a cultural background. Like I'll mention Brazil, they have samba. Like they
yeah,
grew up with samba. That's not what we heard on the radio.
yeah,
And the cultural shift I'm seeing is we now have multicultural centers around the world. Like Toronto is, you name it, every background.
it's center as well.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so like in Toronto, there's over 85. Well, now there'd be over 90,000 Brazilians in
Right.
Toronto.
I didn't realize there was that many Brazilians in Canada now.
Yeah. Well, and as well, we used to run any week in Ireland, and every Sunday there is a buffet of Brazilian food, and all the Brazilians would come out. So I've seen it around the world, and what's happening is online, especially YouTube, with lyric translations,
Yeah,
now Latin American music is really taking off. And
yeah,
we're seeing music that's not Western commercial music at
yeah.
the top. And I'm here in Thailand right now, and I just was at like really big music festival and
So,
saw T-pop artists, Thailand pop artists, like not K-pop,
yeah,
Thai pop. Um, and I could see, like, I was sitting there watching, I'm like, man, I could see this starting to take off
yeah,
in other places.
yeah,
Uh, so I think we're going to see this. We're already seeing it. The sort of like culturally diverse music is going to be on the rise, and the radio commercial music is kind of less.
yeah,
And so people like me are being exposed to music we didn't grow up with. Where again, every culture has its own music. Like
yeah,
there's cha-cha, merengue, there's samba, there's classical. Like I was over in Eastern Europe, and the amount of classical music concerts happening is
yeah,
insane.
yeah.
Uh,
It's leveling that
so
field, isn't it? It's leveling
yeah,
the playing field, I think.
and I think the beauty of technology is we're seeing it on our community is wherever you are in the world now, you can connect with other people that are part of your community.
Yes.
Um, we don't have to physically be there. So I think we're we're just on the cusp of something new.
Fingers
And
crossed. I'm hoping so.
yeah,
Because that's exciting, and you're always at the forefront of that as well, Darryl. So, I'm sure you know more about it than I do. But I take your advice and I think so. I definitely agree.
well, where tech is going, like we've seen a lot of talks about a year and a half ago about the metaverse,
Yeah, yeah,
and it hasn't gone away. Just people aren't talking about it as much, but it's still there and it's still being developed.
yeah,
The barrier is the cost of tech for somebody to participate, like just a regular user. And think of like cell phones in the early days. Not everybody had one.
Everyone could afford it.
Prices came down.
Yeah,
Everybody had,
yeah,
now prices are back up. Um, but there's going to be a time where, wow, anybody could be on the metaverse.
yeah,
And what we're going to see is we're going to go to the space on the metaverse that we only want to be at.
yeah.
And then we'll be able to be with the
In
same
our
type of
bubble,
people,
in our communities.
whoever we
Yeah,
want to be.
yeah,
Um, and I'd like to think that it's going to be built in a way that has a good meaning behind it. And um, will be places where it's like, yeah, this is like it's niche. That's where we're going. I just saw announcement of a streaming service for electronic music.
right.
So instead of just being on Spotify, I like there could be a hard rock, heavy metal streaming service. There could be a jazz streaming service. I
Comes more
think that's
and more specific. Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
So,
It's been an awesome chat, Darryl. Like we've literally got 4 minutes left, and I want to get
oh
into the
wow,
instant successes and how the audience can connect with you or find out more about the amazing work that you do and the platforms that you're running at the moment.
sure. Sorry, I talk a lot.
No, that's fine.
What was the first part of the question? Sorry.
A bit more about the major wins and successes and how the audience can connect with you and find out more about the platforms that you're running.
For sure. Major wins and successes. One, I'm still doing stuff in music.
Yay.
Uh, 40 years later or whatever. Um, and I would say, I've been very lucky to work with companies like Live Nation. I know a lot of people like Blue Live Nation, but it was a great company to work with. They were a client
Yeah,
for 8 years. I just finished working with CD Baby in downtown. Um, and the bit of advice I got to say is all of those were referrals.
yeah,
And in this business, it is who you know. So treat people well.
yeah.
Um, and big advice I say is offer help before asking. And
Great
I
advice.
think that,
Great
yeah,
advice.
I think if you help people, they're going to help you back and don't expect it. It'll come when you're least expecting it.
And just be yourself. Don't try and be someone that you're not as well. I think is some also great advice because everyone else is taken. Just be you, be kind, be respectful, and support others and build community. That's really what music's about, isn't it?
Yes, it's music is a connector. Um, I was just at this festival and we had people from all these different countries, Russia included,
Awesome.
and others. And you know what? There was never talk of politics. There
Right.
was never talk of anything. And I feel we're always in this bubble and we're like, wow, isn't this cool? This is good music. And we get to talk music, we get to listen to music, and we don't talk politics and stuff.
What's cool
And
about music? That's what's so
yeah,
cool about it.
and I think, you hear all the stuff in the news, but when you get to meet people from all these nations, they're just people and everybody's pretty much the same. They just want happiness and health. And it's a really cool thing. I'm very lucky to get to do that. And last part was how do they find me? If you Google me, I'm really easily to be found, especially Instagram. I'm active on Instagram. Other social platforms, not as much these days, but Instagram is where I'm at. So Darryl_Hurs, Hurs.
I'll leave those in the
Um,
link descriptions below as well, so everyone can find you. And also your platforms before we go, because I know you've got a couple.
yeah, well, the main one I would say is just go to ditcommunity.com. We've got an app in all the stores as well you could download. There's a quick sign up form just so that we know you are in the music industry. And it's free and everyone's welcome.
I'll be sharing that in the new year when it comes out. Thank you ever so much for your time, your expertise. Keep up the amazing work. And here's to another 10 years of Darryl. Fingers crossed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. Have a lovely time in Thailand. And I can't wait to see you soon again online with Do It Yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Not even do it yourself, do it together. I was just joking. See, Thank you, Darryl. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. Bye now.